Rob's Child here. Welcome, everybody. We're going to do Chapter 6 today of Security Analysis. Nothing I say in any of these videos is any kind of investment advice, and my intention with these videos is not to replace the contents of this book, but to supplement them and advertise the book to you. If you're a serious investor, you should be reading this book. Also, please join in on any discussions on the material in the comments below, as always. So this begins part 2 of the book called Fixed Value Investments. And this is chapter 6, the selection of fixed value investments. So the first main point that we will discuss today is that when we're defining bonds, we're of course including the category of bonds, including preferred shares, as potentially part of this category, and not bonds with strange things that make them correlate to the stock price, like convertibility of the bonds. If it's convertible to stocks, that's not really part of what we're talking about in this chapter, of course. So first main point is he describes it as a negative art, and I sum that up in my mind as simply be picky with bonds. This is an area where you really need to make sure that you're confident that the principal is protected minimally, and hopefully you get all of your interest payments as well. The next main point is that they go over the 4 principles of picking fixed value securities. And just to list them straight out, the first one is safety, the ability to pay. Number 2, the ability to pay no matter what. In depressed conditions, you can still pay. Number 3, he says the absence of safety is not compensated by a high coupon. So just because something has a high coupon on it, that's not compensation for safety. Safety is being most important with fixed value investments. And then point 4 is that in order to pick a good fixed value type security, you have to test the numbers, make sure the numbers look good. And I don't think he goes into how to do that exactly in this chapter. It's mostly regarding senior and junior bonds. And so going straight into that, the biggest point of the whole rest of this chapter is if you have junior securities, which have, of course, they're the second people to get paid. You have senior securities, they always get priority for the payments first, and then the junior ones get payment next. Now, he just discusses ad nauseum that if the company is not going to go bankrupt, why would anyone in their right mind want to own the senior security over the junior security, assuming that the junior security has a higher yield? And sometimes it doesn't. And so if it doesn't, then you would prefer, that would be the only case where you would really prefer the senior security, because it does give a feeling of a little bit more safety. But he's saying, there's no point for that if the junior securities yield more, because in most cases, if a company goes bankrupt, the senior securities lose so much value that it wasn't worth investing it in the first place, equally to the fact that you're losing potentially everything in the junior securities. One good point here on here that I think relates to price book ratio involves the fact that, when you're holding a corporate bond, you're kind of assuming that, okay, well, why don't I just look at the book value? In other words, if they were to sell all their stuff right now, if the book value is low enough, well, then obviously they'd be able to pay me all the money they owed to me. So a big point he says here is no, that's not necessarily true. And the reason for that is because the supposed value of property, even if we're talking about like a factory that exists on land and you're talking about the price of the land, in a severe decline of economic activity as a whole, or even of that business, the value of that land can go way down to the point of not being able to be compensated for it. And then it can get complicated with courts, and it's this whole chapter is just about safety. When you're looking for fixed value investments, number one priority is safety. And as long as you can achieve that safety, look for a higher yield of a company that you expect, that you want to have a corporate bond from. So that, in essence, I think is the whole point of this chapter. He goes into a bunch of different examples just to pretty much reiterate the same things. Like, the only reason you would get a senior security to a junior one is if it has a similar or the same yield, which can happen sometimes, by the way. So I just wanted to finish up this episode with a quote, just the very last sentence of this chapter. Before this last sentence, he's discussing some bonds that, were able to make it through and actually provide security for the bondholders. So certain people got paid, other people didn't. And he says, sometimes it's not clear what's going to happen, and during a reorganization, it's just not a safe situation. And so he says, just general rule, hence, he says, the ordinary investor may be well advised to leave such issues out of his calculations and stick to the rule that only strong companies have strong bonds. Obviously, meaning you should not even be considering purchasing the debt of a company that you're worried about going bankrupt. This is not a good idea. That pretty much sums up the whole chapter in my mind. Please leave any comments about this chapter or these videos in this comment section below. And that's all I have for you on chapter 6. Rob's Child.